Welcome to the Expert Edge. This is the show where we bring on experts in their fields of health and wellness and related practices, hear their stories, and learn what they see working in the field of diabetes reversal and prevention. And I'm really happy to introduce today's guest, Jen Fontanilla. She's a certified money coach, TEDx speaker, and author. So welcome, Jen.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you.
And you might be asking yourself, why are we talking to a money coach today? Well, I'll tell you why. I've been working with people that are trying to reverse their diabetes and pre-diabetes for many, many years. And I've realized that one of the biggest factors pushing the disease in their bodies is stress. And guess what? The top stress in our world is today. It's really around finances. In fact, we know it's the top stress that on relationships. It's often the top stress in people's lives. And so today, I wanted to bring Jen in to help us manage our stress around money and maybe have less of that. So that's what we're here for today. And Jen is the best-selling author of 7 books. She has 25 years of graphic design experience and has worked with brands like Disney, Sony, Target. And she's a former financial advisor where she taught workshops for clients like Goodwill and the U.S. Air Force ROTC. She regularly speaks at organizations like the USC and Children's Hospital in Los Angeles. She loves to help creative entrepreneurs transform their mindset around money, gain confidence, charge what they're worth, build a life of wealth, happiness, and joy. And whether or not you're an entrepreneur, I know you're going to find a lot of value in our interview today. And I'd like us to start with a little bit of your story, Jen. How did you get interested in this whole intersection of lifestyle, wealth management, that sort of thing?
Well, in college, I actually wanted to be a doctor. So after high school, I absolutely loved biology, anatomy, physiology. I fell in love with it. And I said, I'm going to be a doctor. So I go in. By the third year, I realized I don't want to do this. But I loved science so much. And so I ran into a friend on campus and he showed me this flyer and he's like, hey, look at this. I made this in Photoshop. And I was like, what? You made this in Photoshop? What is that? And so this is circa 1998, something
Yeah, that
like
was
that.
like really new stuff.
Right. It was like version 6 at the time. And so
Mhm.
I was just fascinated. And I actually had always been artistic. My grandfather was an artist. And so
Mm.
I always had it in me. But the problem was my idea of making money from art was, oh, painting pictures and making sculptures. And I only thought of fine art. So my
Mhm.
idea of commercial art it just didn't exist. So until I saw this flyer. So I have a biology background. So needless to say, I just graduated and then I said, I'm going to pursue the design stuff. So I ended up
Mhm.
doing that. And it was very lucrative. I was a very young designer. I was in my early 20s, making more than my parents at the time. And this is when I was doing things for the movie theaters, the
Mhm.
industry, and creating big displays and packages for video games and movies. And it got to a point where I'm like, gosh, I'm making all this money and I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it. This is really
Mm.
dumb. I have a college degree. I finished in 3 years. And yet I had no financial literacy background. And that really bothered
Mhm.
me. And I thought, I'm educated. I actually had a home. I was good at saving. But then I felt there was something missing. And I realized, how come I don't know anything about investing? How come I only know about a
Mhm.
checking account and a savings account? And that really, really didn't sit well with me. And so I
Mhm.
got inspired to go into the industry and I just make the decision like, I'm going to learn this stuff and I'm going to become a financial advisor. So while I still continued doing design, I studied finance and I
Mhm.
got the licenses, became an insurance agent. I got the Series 63, 6, all the stuff. And I was transacting retirement plans and 529
Mhm.
college plans and moving 401k plans. And so that was the background. And that's
Mhm.
how I got into it because I saw a need for it in my own life. And at the time, when I was introduced to a financial advisor before I became one myself, I remember sitting across the table feeling, he's kind of confusing. I could follow it. But there was this need inside me that felt like, you know what? I know that if I feel a little confused and intimidated, I know there are other people sitting across the table from another advisor feeling the same way. I want to be the person that can teach this and that can show this to somebody else, but in plain English and make them feel comfortable. Because if you
Mm,
feel comfortable, you will build confidence in it, and then you will be more likely to continue and then wanting to do the things and carry out the strategy and the plan versus being scared and not doing anything about it.
mm. I love that. And it really is going to resonate with a lot of people I know that are listening today because so many of us, even if we have advanced degrees, probably never had any courses in college or graduate school that really taught us how to use money as a really effective tool. Like you said, we hear about savings, we hear about using a checking and a bank account, but what if we're actually at the point where we want to learn how to manage our money in a way that actually stewards it better, uses it, makes it work for us instead of just holding it up in a savings account. So as we talk about that today, I want to start by asking you, what is a money mindset? That's a term that I know we're going to explore here. And why do you think it's important for people to understand what that is and actually make choices around what kind of a money mindset they want?
Yeah, so money mindset is basically how you view money, that
Hmm.
encompasses your relationship with it. What are the feelings and the emotions that come up when you think about money, whether it's how you approach it, how you save it, how you feel when you hear about it, all those different things, all the stories, all of it is what makes up your money mindset and how you view money and how you relate to it. And so that's what it basically is. And so it's so important because again, like going back to school, we go in, and if we are even lucky to even learn about the logistics, which are like, okay, we can do the checking account, I can do the ledger. Dude, I don't even know if they still teach that. But if we can still do the budgeting, if I can
Hmm.
learn how to do, oh, I'm going to put money into my 401k plan, all those basic things, we hear about that. But then when do we ever hear the conversation about, hey, what did you learn when you were growing up? Did you hear your mom and dad talk about money? Did you see them fighting about money or saying things like, we don't have enough, we can't afford that? Or did you grow up in a household where it never came up? And so you just kind of blindly thought everything was okay, but you had no idea that your parents just chose not to ever talk about it. Neither one is right or wrong, but it's just recognizing the differences in how you grew up, especially if you have a spouse or a partner and you grow up with totally different money stories, you grew up with different, environments. Can you imagine? That's why you mentioned in the beginning about, the things you argue about. It's no wonder that in relationships, especially in
Hmm.
marriages, there's always arguing about money because we come from different backgrounds and upbringing that involve the different money mindsets and the different money stories. So it is so important to understand this because if you have an awareness of how you grew up and the different things you heard, you'll have a better understanding of why you make the financial decisions that you are making.
Mm. And I think that understanding that why behind it is a really important thing for us to consider because it's a much more than figuring out where we want to set this dollar, that dollar, these dollars. It's understanding the why behind it. And the why is how we think about it, isn't it? And, I think a lot of people that might be listening might be like in midlife, or you might be young. The younger you are, the better, probably, as we're listening to this topic. But so many people come into midlife and really start thinking, well, maybe I haven't planned well up until now, but maybe I want to start planning better now. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people make when it comes to planning out their money?
I think the biggest mistake is to do nothing first and foremost, right? And I understand, over the years when I was a financial advisor, I saw a lot of people who were just afraid. And to speak towards the group that's in the midlife, I think that's even a scarier place to be sometimes, especially when there's guilt and shame, where we're feeling, oh gosh, I messed up. I made a lot of stupid decisions. I should have started earlier. I don't know if it's too late. And you can just feel the heaviness, and that's what I look at when I as a money coach in the sector of looking at more at the subconscious patterns and the money mindset. And it's so important for us to be kind and gentle to ourselves and to have compassion. We would never say that to our best friend. Well, if you love them, right? You wouldn't say like, gosh, you're such a screw up, you loser. I can't believe you did that. We wouldn't do that to
Mhm.
somebody else, right? That we love. And so yet we do that to ourselves. So it's really important that we have that compassion. And especially if you're in a situation where it's stressful, you're trying to manage your stress levels. This is so important that you just learn to have compassion and forgiveness. Hey, we all
Mhm.
messed up. My goodness, if you heard my other story about I was a financial advisor at that time, and in 2008, when the market crashed, I not only lost five investment properties, I had to file bankruptcy. I had tax liens with the IRS. I ended up going through a divorce. And talk about imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
Talk about feeling guilty and shameful and like an
Mhm.
idiot. Like I can help
Mhm.
other people, but I can't help myself. And it was just like this weird feeling of like, oh my gosh, like I almost feel like a imposter syndrome loser because I knew what was happening in my own life, and yet I'm helping other people with their retirement planning. And to this day, they're retired, their accounts are great, they're doing amazingly well. So I feel good that they turned out great. And yet at the time it was happening, I was going through so much emotional turmoil and stress. And so I've been there. I know
Mhm.
what it feels like to have all that, that space in your head, just thinking like, gosh, I made all these mistakes. This is so stupid. I can't believe I did that. So it's
Mhm.
super, super important that we love on ourselves and start there.
Oh, I love that. You know, as you went through that really hard time, what are some of the lessons that you learned through that you're now passionate to share with other people?
Oh gosh, where do I start, Lucia? Like, I would say, I think it's really important to have other people on your side that they're not going through it uh, in it with you, but
Mhm.
alongside with you, because we're
Mhm.
so caught up in the mess, right? And I think
Mhm.
it's really important that we have, whether it's advisors, counselors, or maybe a therapist, somebody else, maybe even like a trusted friend, maybe just somebody else that you can bounce ideas and thoughts off of and be like, hey, does this sound like a smart idea? What do you think if I, do this? Like going back to my example, I mean, this is like a really stupid example, I'll tell you guys. So if you can top this, like please, like please be kind to yourselves. I In the middle of the divorce, my ex asked me like, hey, can you just, deed over the title to the house? And I'm thinking, I don't know. I was like, gosh, I was in the middle of like, can we save this marriage? Okay, should I do
Mhm.
this? Stupidly, I do it. By the time I realize, like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? The 3-day right of decision had already
Yeah.
passed. It was too
Oh,
late. Guess what? Guess who was on the mortgage? Me.
oh
Completely
no.
stupid, just stupid mistakes like that. And so I look back. I mean, I don't feel guilty about it anymore. But I
Mhm.
mean, I look back and I'm like, yeah, I was totally lost. I
Mm.
I should have at least talked to somebody. And then, it's just the
Mm.
strangest when you're going through something really difficult, your
Yeah.
faculties aren't there. So it's really important to have sound advice, sound advisors
Mm.
around you just to say like, hey, you know what? This came up. Should I do it? And then
Mm.
sometimes it's just like, okay, thank you. Thank you. I just had to ask.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need that confirmation. Or sometimes you need this person to go like, are you crazy? Hell's no. It could be the other way.
Yeah.
But you need that person to let you know, like, hey, I got your hand. No, we're not doing that. Or like, yeah, you know what? That might be a good idea. You might also want to ask so and so. So having that wise counsel, whatever format that comes in, have that person there with you because it's really important for that person to walk alongside you while you're going through a lot of stressful things and that because we're just
Mm.
not thinking straight at that time.
I think that is such wise counsel. As you think about women in midlife, some women have like gone through a divorce or going through that, which is a huge change in financial situation. And we know statistically that usually women get the short end of the stick in that sort of a breakup. So like understanding how to get somebody that can really give you sound advice around the finances, but not just around divorce. What about being widowed? Like many women that might be now in their 60s or 70s and experiencing the loss of a spouse. And often that was a generation where maybe the men took care of all of the finances, right? And so I think that what Jen has just said about finding someone that can actually give you good counsel around finances before you make any big decisions would be really important. And those big decisions are things like who owns what, bank accounts, property, other assets. It really can make a huge difference in your financial outcome 10 years down the road, what you do today in those kinds of situations. And when we're really stressed is not usually a good time for us to depend on just our solo opinions. At least that's what I think.
Right, right. I also wanted to add to what you said, which I absolutely love that you brought up. One of the things that has been coming up lately, because now I'm in that age group where our parents are elderly, and some people's, they're not thinking straight anymore, and dementia's starting to set in, all kinds of things like that.
Mm,
And I've had friends that have called me. They're like, "Hey, Jen, what do I do? My parents are getting up there." One of the things I want to encourage you, if you're in that situation, is have a conversation with your adult children or adult child, and be open to it. Many times you'll see it's that they want to set the affairs straight with you while you still can. And I would say the biggest thing is to be open-minded to it. One of the things that's very hard for me to experience is talking to my friends and hearing that their parents are very against the conversation, or
mm,
very, oh gosh, you just want the money, or, why do we have to talk about this? And it's a very touchy situation. I understand, but I just want to encourage, any of you out there that you're crossing into that stage, or you might be in that stage, or maybe it was something that happened a few years ago, to be open-minded to that, because this is about settling affairs in a very smooth and easy way. I'm not saying it's easy, because there's a lot of emotion involved. There's, like, finances can make people crazy. I mean, I've seen it all. I've seen it all. And so, but here's the thing, the bigger problem lies when it's too late. There's things
mhm,
that cannot be done, like setting up a living trust. You have to be of sound mind. If there's life insurance involved and you're trying to get it, I mean, there's just all these different logistics in
mhm,
terms of the strategies and the planning that makes it very difficult if there's no full cooperation, because we can't sign the documents for you. You have to
mhm,
approve it. But if you're not willing to have that conversation, and God forbid, you pass away and none of these affairs have been settled, and then there's property involved, and then there's, like, assets that have to be figured out, and where does it go? It becomes a big mess for your loved ones who have been left behind.
yeah,
It's like, I encourage people to think about it. Is that how you want to leave your legacy? Is that how you want to leave things for your loved ones? Now they got to figure out the mess without you, because it is a mess. Not
yeah,
only that, I was going to add too, if there's property involved, like there's a home, and there's no instructions left behind. Now the arguing is happening, after all this is said and done, and then there's even more money that's wasted in probate
mhm,
court.
yeah,
The estate lawyers. I mean, it's just a mess. So please, please,
yeah,
please, I'm begging and urging you, please have this conversation, so that you have some decisions that you still have, agency over. What do you
yes,
want? What are your wishes? And have that open conversation, because it'll just give everybody peace of mind. And if this is something that can be difficult, then here again, I'm going to ask you, bring in a third person, bring in
yeah.
somebody that can I don't want to use the word mediate, but in some families it's needed.
Yes, and it reminds me of kind of an experience I had personally with my mother-in-law, who was living next door to us for a few years, and her health started to go downhill. So she made the decision that she already had a will, she had a trust set up, and she decided that she was going to divest herself of her estate at that point. She didn't have a big estate. She wasn't like somebody really wealthy, but she owned a home. And so she decided, I'm going to sell my house. I'm going to distribute the funds the way I want. And then I'm just going to choose to live on like my retirement, which was like a fixed income. And because she wanted to be able to know what was going on and be able to distribute things according to her wishes. And she was so wise. I mean, she had been divorced for many years, so she'd been on her own. And I think maybe that experience had taught her something about the importance of the planning. But she did that. She sold her home. We ended up using part of that to add on a mother-in-law apartment to our home. So she was able to move in with us. And it turned out to be just in a nick of time because within the first year after she was with us, she was diagnosed with Parkinson's. She started having cognitive issues. She went downhill, and within 3 or 4 years, she couldn't really take care of her bills anymore. And so, she had already made sure that one of us was on her bank account. So everything was a very smooth transition as she declined. And we were able to keep her in our home and take care of her till she passed away. And everything went very smoothly because of the way she pre-planned. And I just loved that. And it was a good lesson to me because I found myself in the position of doing elder care for a number of family members over the years since then. And that's been one of my highest priorities, getting directives done, living wills done, bank accounts with somebody else's name on it, so that when they pass away, it's not a catastrophe.
Oh, praise God, you went through such a smooth transition. I love that success story, and
Yeah.
I'm so relieved to hear that that was your experience because I'm sure
Mm,
you've seen where it
it's
wasn't
not
there
always.
wasn't any
Yeah.
preparation. And when I was listening to you talk, it made me think of, if you're a believer, we are called
Mm,
to be good stewards of our money.
totally.
So who are we to not do the proper planning? If you've been entrusted with all this money and if you've grown it and you've accumulated wealth and property or whatever, and it doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm a bazillionaire. It could even be, hey,
Yeah.
there's a couple 100,000 that got accumulated in equity or in, some retirement accounts,
Hmm.
or maybe it was a pension that was left behind, or whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
You're still called to be good stewards of that money and to properly plan so that the next generation can plan correctly and not
Hmm.
go through any turmoil that could have been avoided.
It's so true. And I think if it hadn't been for my experience with my mother-in-law, I might have missed an opportunity with my parents because my dad started having cognitive issues. And then he had a stroke. And I went out to California where he was right after the stroke. And fortunately, and we just praise God for this, he was still completely oriented, completely knew who he was, all of these things. And we got his power of attorney for healthcare signed, which he had not done. But it
Wow.
allowed me then to be in a place to make decisions for him health wise. And then actually, it had been about 6 months earlier where, as family members, we realized that everything wasn't ticking quite right, but we didn't know why. And he was a physician, so he was very loath to have be evaluated cognitively by anybody else. He's like, "No, I'm fine." And so we were out there for a short visit, and it was actually at the time of the Paradise Fire. If you've been in California, you know about that. So they ended up being evacuated for most of a month. And so we were with them in their evacuation site. And I realized as I talked to my parents that my dad had bank accounts my mother was not on. And for whatever reason, he did not want to put her on. And so, because he had already made me durable power of attorney for him, um, I talked to him and I'm like, why don't we just add my name to this account that only has you on it? If you don't want to put my mom on it, that's okay. And I'm not going to do anything with it. Let's just have my name on it. And so I remember the day we had two banks we needed to do this at. And we went to the first bank, everything got signed fine. We got to the second bank and he was getting tired. And we got in front of the bank officer and she asked for his ID. And he didn't want to give it to her. And we're all sitting there going like, this really needs to happen. I think it took us something like 15 or 20 minutes to
Wow.
reassure him that it was okay. And that he was not just signing away, this account, and it was like, you still have complete control, because he was still with it. Um, and we were eventually able to do that. And I was so thankful because it was only a few months later when he had the stroke. And although he was somewhat oriented for a few weeks after the stroke, he started going downhill after that pretty quickly and was pretty soon completely nonverbal and non-ambulatory, like was total care. And that account was what we had to use for some of his care. And we would not have had the ability to do that in any kind of a simple manner if that hadn't happened. And so it's like, I really do want to encourage all of you out there listening
Girl, you gave me
to pay
chills.
attention to these things.
You gave me chills. Yeah, whether it's a health issue or death or divorce, I've been in different situations with people walking through it. And one of the things that I also want to encourage you out there, if you're listening, is understand just because you're married, and like to what Lucia said, just because you're married doesn't mean you have access. They are not going to talk to you. The bank,
Right.
the investment company, the insurance company, if you are not a co-owner on that account, it don't matter how long you've been married. It
Yeah.
don't matter how much you beg. They do not have the ability to talk to you about those accounts. And this is also, going back to what should somebody do? You really need to get on board with your partner and find out, like, hey, can we just have a conversation? Like, what do we have? I just want to have an idea of what do we have. So in case I get questions or in case I need to help the kids out, you just need to be in the know. You really
Yeah.
need to be in the know, because once somebody's gone, you really can't ask them. So you
Yeah.
have to understand what assets are involved. Because how in the world are you going to find out about that one bank account from 1982 over at, Bank of America? You're just not. And so there
Yeah.
could be assets all around. And especially if you are in a situation where you're struggling, you're barely making ends meet. I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure if there was an account that even just had only 20,000 in it, it would be a world of help to you. So it's so important that you
Mhm.
understand what is going on in the financial household, and please don't be in the dark. Please stop saying, "Oh, I don't understand money. That he handles all of that. I don't know what's going on. I don't want to know." You need to know.
Yeah.
You need to know, because you don't want to be in a world of hurt, and you definitely don't want to be in a world of regret when something happens and then it's too late. You cannot ask at that point.
Yeah. I just totally agree because I've had multiple experiences with elderly family members now at this point where getting that paperwork done was such a lifesaver. This is my last story, but my husband had an aunt who lived alone independently, had a disability. She was deaf mute, and she'd been independent for many years and had no papers because in the deaf mute community there's often much less understanding around these things. That's harder for them to learn about it. And so it became clear that nobody else in the family was really helping her with any of her affairs, and when we asked questions, she didn't even really know what a will was. And so she did not have a lot of assets, but we knew that if she passed away with no paperwork, that nothing would go to anything she wanted, right? Because it would just be eaten up in probate or whatever, even if there's
Right.
next to nothing. And, we were able to work through that, have conversations with her, bring in an interpreter. And she finally got her last of her directives done in November. And she ended up getting the COVID shot and passing away 3 weeks later in January. And if we hadn't gotten that paperwork done, once again, it would have been very difficult to shut down her affairs, her bank accounts, all of those things. And she actually had some significant savings in terms of, like, she wanted to donate to some causes and some things that could not have happened if we hadn't done that. So yes, I just, like, over and over, for personal experience, I want to say it makes a
No.
difference. And those conversations are worth it, even when they're not easy.
And you know what I love about this last story that you just shared about your aunt is that because of the conversations, because of the proper
Mhm.
planning and being proactive, think about the causes that benefited in a beautiful way because of
Mhm.
her generosity. If that
Yeah.
hadn't taken place, that money, like you said, it would have gone to probate, it would have just gone somewhere
Hmm.
else and not to the people who could have used it from these
Hmm.
nonprofit organizations. And so it's just
Yeah.
another beautiful way to leave a legacy and to have that planning in place to affect the lives of other people in such a positive way.
Yeah, I totally agree. And as we talk about a lot of people listening to us today are women. What do you think is the best thing women can do to prepare themselves for their financial future?
Yeah, well, first, like we just talked about, get the lay of the land, especially if you don't know what's going on and you've been in the dark. And I understand that it can be scary if this is something that you haven't looked at. This wasn't something that you took responsibility for, and maybe you just
Hmm.
depended on somebody else, maybe your spouse, or, oh, he takes care of it, or I don't understand that. This is where I'm going to encourage you to shift that mindset. So we talked about money mindset in the very beginning, right? And I think this is a beautiful place to encourage you to shift it. Instead of approaching it and saying, this is scary, I don't understand it. How about you just take little steps. Like I'm I'm a powerful woman that can learn anything. I can take the steps to understand what's going on. I can feel empowered once I know what kind of money is involved. It is just
Hmm.
shifting it little by little instead of saying like, I don't know, I don't want to learn that. That's scary. I've never, money makes me, confused. Let's pay attention to the words that we're saying and let's shift it, because I always think about how, life and death is in the power of the tongue.
So true.
If you keep saying that, well, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to continue down the road of you not learning it, and it's going to continue to be a
Hmm.
scary thing versus, you know what? I'm empowered. I have resources around me. There are so many organizations, whether it's nonprofit. I mean, Lucia is an amazing resource right there. Like this woman has gone through it. She's an amazing resource. Ask her. So there is no excuse in terms of you getting, not getting the help. So start there. Check your languaging and know that you can be empowered to learn this and that there is a way to change that trajectory of you coming from a fear-based mentality and moving over to
Hmm.
an abundance and positive mentality of like, okay, you know what? If there's something I'm going to do, it's this right now. I'm going to be empowered. I'm going to know what to do. So there's that, like understanding and getting the assessment and understanding, okay, this is what I have. Then the next thing is to, I would say this is also important, part of the planning that you've shared. Do you have all the estate planning paperwork in place? Are there insurance policies that you've signed up for a long time ago? Maybe you forgot. I'm telling you, oh my goodness, Lucia. Back in the day when I used to have to make house visits, I would see people putting their policies in the kitchen drawer. I would see, I would see like a binder that with like envelopes of statements they never
Yeah.
open. Get your stuff together. Start, people, there was a saying that we used to say, like, oh, people will plan for a 3-day vacation to Vegas more than they will plan for the next 30 years of their life.
Mm.
And I get it.
Yeah.
It's not fun. It's not sexy. I get it. But as I, hopefully you've been listening to both of us and you hear what can happen when you don't plan. And so after you get the lay of the land, start organizing your stuff. Okay, do you have oh, here's another one. Gosh, there's so many organizational things. Do you have the passwords to the accounts
Mm.
online?
Mm.
Do you and
Yeah.
your partner, your spouse know like how to get into the accounts? Because again, if you don't know how you go so to check it, how you won't even know what
Hmm.
the balances are. So
Hmm.
get organized, get your statements in order or get access to the online accounts, set that up. Understand, do you have insurance policies? Do you have medical directive, power of attorney? Do you have a will? Do you have a
Hmm.
living trust? And you need all of these things.
Hmm.
And who's going to take care of the bills if something happens? You don't necessarily pass away, but you're incapacitated. You're in a
Yeah.
coma. You can't think or anything.
Yeah.
The bills keep going on. The creditors don't stop. So all of these things need to be put into place
Hmm.
having these conversations. I'm sure there's checklists. There's checklists on all these things, and so understanding. Okay, these are also the conversations you have with your adult children. What do we have in place? because they need to know, because they're most likely going to be the ones that are going to step in and help you with this stuff. They need to kind of be in the know of like what's going on, but it's very difficult when this conversation hasn't taken place. And then the only thing the adult child can say is like, I don't know, we never talked about it. So
Mm,
we want to equip the next generation to make this a smooth process like Lucia went through.
yeah.
So, and then I think the third step would be like, where what are your wishes? What do you want to happen if something should happen, and who's going to take care of what? Where is the money going? And then even for your lifestyle now, have you sat down and thought about like, okay, this is what I have. How much is what I have going to sustain me for how long? And kind of understanding like, okay, do I have some retirement accounts? What kind of income can I draw from it every month? We kind of need to know these things so you can properly plan, because when we don't plan, I think that's like the whole theme of this conversation, and we don't plan, that's where the stress comes.
Hmm.
So if there's anything I can encourage you to do is to properly plan so that you can reduce that stress level. Because
Absolutely.
what's so much better, I mean, even just listening to Lucia, right? I mean, what's so much better than being in the dark and being in the I don't want to look at it, is feeling empowered
Hmm.
that now I know what's going on. Now I can come from a place and sit in a space of like, you know what? It may not be the best scenario, but at least I know what's going on. Think
Yeah.
about like when you're in a relationship, right? And you don't know why this friend keeps blowing you off. You're trying to make plans with her. Like, I don't know why she keeps saying, she doesn't even say yes. She just keeps saying no, no. Or I don't know. And you're like, gosh, I don't know what's going on, right? And you're trying to make these
Hmm.
plans to go out with your friend. What if your friend just said, no, I can't because I'm gonna be, I'm gonna go visit my daughter at her when she's in, when she goes to university. There's a difference, right? When you have a
Yeah.
definitive answer, you can sit with that and move on because you
Hmm.
know the answer, right? It's no, you're not in this weird nebulous of I don't know. But when you're in the I don't know, that's when you get the stress.
Yeah.
That's when you're just like, I don't know what's going on, and you're trying to ignore it, but it's bothering you. It's like that pebble in your shoe that you can't ignore. But
Yes.
when you have the answer, whether it's a good
Hmm.
answer or a bad answer, at least you have an answer, and at least you can move forward and make the next decision from that point. So the
Yeah.
point I'm
I love
making,
that.
right? So the point I'm making is be encouraged to at least get an answer and to be empowered so that you know what the next move is versus staying in this space of I don't know, because that I don't know space is what's causing stress. That
Hmm.
I don't know space is not fun. It sucks. It doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
So why are we choosing to stay there when all we need to do is plan and shift our mindset, speak differently about our finances, look forward to being empowered, tapping into the people and resources that are around us, and then coming from a space of abundance mindset and planning and properly doing it, having conversation, and then feeling it. You know what? That wasn't maybe it wasn't fun, but at least I did it, and now I can
Hmm.
move forward. Now I feel good. Now I
Hmm.
know what's happening. Because when we know what's happening, that's when we feel confident.
Hmm. I love that, Jen. And I think we could chat for a whole lot longer, but this has been really
Right.
fun. And
Good.
I really think that hopefully this has given some people food for thought, because I want you not to have a lot of money stress in your life. And starting to think about it is one of the first ways to lower that level in your life so that it's not impacting your health. Because remember, health is wealth, and it comes by choice, not by chance. So thank you for being here with us today.
You are so welcome. My pleasure.